Welcome to Road to Recovery. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Road to Recovery, Advocacy and Insights for Trucking Accidents with Sagi Shaked. Sagi is founder of Shaked Law Personal Injury Lawyers, and he's ranked as one of the top 100 trial lawyers in the U.S. by the American Trial Lawyers Association. With a wealth of experience in personal injury, wrongful death, and complex litigation, he passionately advocates for victims and has recovered multi-million-dollar settlements and damages for his clients. My name's Sean O'Connor, and today, Sagi and I are talking about traumatic brain injuries that don't appear on imaging and how these cases are evaluated and proven in a personal injury context. Sagi, good to see you.
Good seeing you again, Sean.
And we've talked about this in past episodes, the idea that these scanning tools, perfectly legitimate, but they're only one factor in evaluating this stuff. So how common is it for someone to suffer a TBI, even when CT scans or MRIs say, hey, everything's normal here?
So it's extremely common, and I'll tell you just at the outset why it's common, and then I'll give you examples. So the medical literature is clear that people can have negative CTs and negative MRIs and still have mild traumatic brain injuries. Now, sometimes the insurance companies think they can't have a brain injury if they have negative CTs and negative MRIs. So just before we start talking about why, I want you to think about this. My last two trials that dealt with brain injuries was negative CT, negative MRI, both of them. One resulted in 6 million and one resulted in 4.5 million. And this is with really crappy offers from the insurance companies. So don't think because you have a negative CT or a negative MRI that it doesn't detect it. Remember, a CT, they're designed at the hospital and they look for major structural damage to the brain. So bleeding, swelling, fractures. They don't look for the minor disruptions to brain function that can still affect and have a major effect on a person's life.
Yeah. We all know the brain's super complex, and even the science of it is continuing to evolve. And I get that. Also, if I'm after an accident, I'm feeling off in whatever number of ways I might be feeling off. And these tests, these expert medical scientific machine tests tell me that everything looks fine here. I'm going to doubt my own feelings potentially, which you're telling me like, no, dude, your feelings are real.
They definitely are real, because when you think about traditional imaging, your CT scan, your MRIs, they're going to come back on what they call the mild traumatic brain injury. I hate the adjective, but the mild traumatic brain injury, because those CTs and MRIs are meant to capture big picture items. They're not meant to capture the microscopic damage or the kind of functional disruption that someone has, whether it's neural pathways or the chemical changes in the brain or impaired communication between different parts of the brain. The CT and the MRI are not going to catch that. So if the person is going through it, or if someone is going through it, they can have real symptoms. And just because the MRI is negative doesn't mean those symptoms aren't real. It doesn't mean they're going crazy. It just means that the imaging on that specific day didn't pick it up, or it wasn't enough of an emergency for the hospital to keep that person hospitalized.
Yeah. And it does make sense. I mean, it's possible for me to have a distinct fear of getting back in the car and driving the commute to work, and not have that fear isn't going to show up in a scan potentially. It's literally just like I don't know, post-traumatic's the right term there, but it's definitely a response to the accident I had.
Yeah, absolutely. So what you'll have is, someone who has the signs and symptoms. You'll look at the signs and symptoms. And if a person has, because they're going to tell the story, right?
Yeah.
Whether a CT is negative or positive, that's not telling the story. That's a portion of the story. But how do you explain it if someone's been in a violent crash or in a crash? How else can you explain the headaches or one of these symptoms? Headaches, dizziness, nausea, light sensitivity, noise sensitivity, fatigue, memory problems, trouble concentrating, slow thinking, irritability, mood swings, sleep disruption, and difficulty just doing normal daily tasks. How else do you explain it? Those are real symptoms that people actually go through. And again, sometimes they get better over time and you're just left with one or two of those symptoms. But that one or two of those symptoms can really be, a life changer, whether it's fatigue, think about that, you're always fatigued, or slow thinking. These are just two samples of the many different things that can happen from a brain injury, even with a negative MRI or a negative CT.
So let's talk about specialists you mentioned in the past. So I'm thinking about neurologists or neuropsychologists and how they contribute to evaluating these types of injuries. Is this where would be reaching out to these specialists, or how does that come into play?
So usually, the hospital will recommend a neurologist, or their treating physician will recommend a neurologist, and the neurologist will give you the medical and the neurological side of the injury. So, like the symptoms, how the brain functions, and the overall clinical picture. Remember, we're getting a clinical diagnosis. That's how you treat, and that's how you diagnose a brain injury. We don't diagnose a brain injury based on a scan. A scan is one component of 30 different types of tests. And then you have neuropsychologists who evaluate how that injury affects the person's cognition, whether it's memory, attention, or processing speed, or executive functioning, or problem solving. So those two together are part of a team. Now, the team is a lot larger than just a neurologist and the neuropsych. And again, not every case needs a neuropsychologist, but every
Right.
case that's a traumatic brain injury case needs a neurologist.
Sure. You must have handled a case where, the imaging appeared normal, right? In the negative in the correct parlance, right? It's like negative meaning normal, meaning we don't see anything that's wrong. But further evaluation told a different story. Have you had a case or more than one case where that's happened?
Yeah, actually, the case we tried in January of 2026, the imaging of the brain was normal. And that's what we heard from the defense in jury selection. That's what we heard from the defense in their opening. That's what we heard from the defense throughout the case. The imaging is normal. This person is normal. So they couldn't explain why did the person have all these issues for the last 3 years. All they could say is the imaging was normal. So basically, they're trying to call the client a liar. Um, yeah, they're going through all of this just for to go through a trial and be put in the hot seat is what they want you to believe. So we had a neurologist who worked up the case, did a full clinical picture, not just on the MRIs. And the neurologist explained you can have a negative CT, you can have a negative MRI. This isn't just me saying it, the neurologist was saying it. And literally, the peer reviewed journal after journal after journal for the last longer than I've been practicing law, so more than 26 years. We're now in 2026, who say, and they write about it, all these doctors, you can have those negative CTs. And so when you have someone who, I'll give you an example, like one of my clients who just wanted to be alone after his crash. He used to sit at dinners with his family. He would go and actually sit in the car in the garage and eat his dinner in the garage. This is from the brain injury. We know that because we know what he was like before. We interviewed the parents, we interviewed the sisters, we interviewed the friends that he used to hang out with. This is a completely different human being. Again, we treat these like wrongful death cases. Someone died on that day and a new person was born.
You mentioned the neuropsychologist and the type of testing that they do. Is there sort of formal documentation that they're focused on in terms of cognitive deficit?
Yeah, so they measure, they give you memory games to play. They measure attention, concentration, language, processing speed, and executive functioning. So, and then you can translate that based on what their tests show onto what kind of struggles does the person have on a day to day basis. Now, keep in mind for anyone listening to this, the defense will hire a neuropsychologist that's never seen a problem with anybody, period. They just do it. They're on the payroll. Uh, they have no credibility. It's your job as the attorney to expose that and to show that they don't have any credibility. So, what a neuropsychologist is supposed to do, if they're ethical and professional, problem is the ones with it for the defense are not. Um, they're supposed to give you the structure and credibility of the symptoms and how it plays or interplays on that person's life. Now, it's kind of subjective, so you can beat up a neuropsychologist pretty bad on the defense because these are all objective tests.
Yeah. Yeah. The subjectivity of it and a lot of observation, but it does come down to like, no, we've observed, we put him through these tests and, we have documentation of how he used to be. And now we've got documentation of how he is. And, you know, that, that
Yeah,
kind of doc.
the defense will say that everyone's a malingerer, or they have somatoform. These are fancy words they created, the insurance industry created, to say that people are lying. That's
Yeah.
what they try to say in all these traumatic brain injury cases. The defense comes with the malingering defense or the somatoform defense to say the person is lying. They always attack the people that are hurt.
To wrap up, this is sort of on the practical side of things, but also, completely relevant to the conversation. I want to have as strong a case as I can. What types of documentation help strengthen these cases? Because like you said, they're going to come at you with the, hey, you're a lying malingerer. Say what you will.
Sure. So you want to have consistent documentation, right? Uh, Emergency room records, the fire rescue records, the follow up, the neurology consultations. If you have a neuropsychologist, their testing and what their notes show if they're having therapy. You want to look at the work records as well. If you have a child or a teenager, look at the school records and how are they interacting with other students, or if they're in a work setting, how are they interacting with other coworkers? And then how long are these symptoms continuing? Because obviously, the longer they're continuing, it's more evidence that the brain injury is still impacting this person. So it's our job as attorneys to bring it to life, but it requires work. You really got to go talk to the people, get the witnesses, and show the struggles that your client is going through, because merely saying your client has a brain injury, that's not going to get you paid. You need to show, are they struggling at work? Are they forgetting their appointments? Are they struggling with conversations? Are they overwhelmed with the tasks that they used to do that were simple and now they're just overwhelmed? Do they need more rest? Think about those types of issues when you're handling one of these cases.
Great to see you. See, we're pretty much out of time here, and I know this conversation will continue in the future. So I'll say goodbye to you here.
Thanks for having me.
That's it for today's episode of Road to Recovery, Advocacy and Insights for Trucking Accidents. If you'd like to learn more about Sagi Shaked and his work at Shaked Law Personal Injury Lawyers, visit the website, shakedlaw.com. You'll get all kinds of resources there to help you understand your rights after a serious trucking accident and what you need to do to protect your future. Thanks for listening. I'm Sean O'Connor. As always, leave a review, share a link with a friend, and subscribe to the podcast. That would be great. Have a great day.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.